Meet Pete. Pete doesn't know it yet, but in 3 hours and 41 minutes at 7:43 a.m., he will be rushing his pregnant wife Abby to the hospital. He won't be thinking about whether his car is charged and able to safely cover the distance from here to there, because the engineers who designed and built Pete's car already thought all about it. SAE International assembled a team of engineers from all over the world to think systematically about the charging of Pete's car. These engineers developed a series of standards that made mass production of Pete's car safe, affordable, and environmentally sustainable. But Pete won't have to think about any of that. He's probably never even heard of us. And we're fine with that. Because in helping the engineers keep Pete's car fully charged and safe, we've done our job. Sleep well, Pete.
Welcome everyone to the Formula SAE Rules Event Overview. Thank you for joining us today and to SAE Detroit section for hosting this event. I am Matthew Meyer, your moderator. Just a little bit of background about me. I'm an SAE member from the Detroit section and I graduated from Lawrence Tech University. I was in their Formula SAE program and was also the SAE student chapter president. And today I now work at General Motors as an EV propulsion lead engineer. Before we start, I want to address a couple housekeeping items. All participants are muted with the camera off to keep the integrity of the meeting. Please do not attempt to unmute yourself or turn your camera on during this discussion out of courtesy to our speakers. We will encourage you to use the chat function to ask any questions you may have. If for any reason you must leave this meeting, it will be posted on the SAE Detroit section YouTube channel at a later date. Today, we're going to be hearing from Steve Sayevitz, your Formula SAE Rules Chair. Steve will provide you information to make your Formula SAE team more successful. The discussion will give you the opportunity to understand the intent of the event and to ask any questions to ensure you don't miss details and provide you with tips on how to become successful. Welcome, Steve.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Matt Meyer, for the introduction. First of all, I want to say thank you to the SAE, and in particular the SAE Detroit section, for putting this on and giving me the opportunity to present and speak with you all this morning. About myself, I'm the Formula SAE Rules Chair. I am also the national scorekeeper for the Formula SAE competitions held in North America. So with that, we'll get into the presentation. Just to give you an idea, I'm going to talk about some items with the rules, with some document usage, some ideas for compliance. I'm going to talk a little bit about some process improvements we had, one recent change you should be aware of, and then want to march through this, but leave plenty of time for any questions and discussion that you have. So as we go through, I may only be talking about the highlights, the overview of the rules themselves. And if you have any other questions or you want to talk about things in a little more depth, we can do that in the questions discussion area. So please make note of that. With that, let's begin. For 2022, we have published several versions of the rules already. We did do a public comment draft in early August this past year, followed by publication of the first version, the 2022 rules, towards the end of August. We published an update to the rules in November, and generally the updates are some clarifications or items that were not correct in version 1. Then there's also been a version 2.1 that was just published earlier this month, containing a change to one of the events that we will discuss later on in the presentation. So hopefully you are using version 2 or version 2.1. So the rules themselves are part of a hierarchy of documents. The Formula SAE rules are the top level document that contain all the high level requirements. One thing I do want to point out is the rules themselves will not answer all the questions you may have. And that is intentional, because there are other documents that we have that would help you implement and understand what we're looking for, particularly the structural equivalency spreadsheet and the electrical systems form. So in some cases, we get some questions about, well, how do I meet this? And well, that's the structural equivalency spreadsheet will guide you through that process. Also mentioned that the tech inspection form is a nice summary of the items that we'll be looking for in tech inspection. And if you are on your team doing the cost event, a lot of information in the cost supplement. It's technically not rules, but if you want to be successful and score well in the cost event, that will be what you need to look at. Now, one thing about the rules is that we do want you to be using the rules, and let me explain briefly why that's the case. It's really two models of human performance that we're looking at. There's what's called rule-based and what's called knowledge-based. Rule-based means you're looking it up, you go to the document, you read the rule, and understand what it says. That has a very low error rate. Then there is knowledge-based. Think of that as you're using the rule set that's in your head. And that may or may not be correct. In fact, it can be correct only 50% of the time. So when you're trying to look at the rules and comply with the rules, the best way to do that is to stay rule-based. So go to the actual rules document, read and see what it says, read the actual rule, and always verify, don't try to guess or assume. Now, one thing is there are areas that aren't so much in the rules, but that is design decisions from your team. So, the rules themselves provide an outline and a basis that is consistent and applied to all teams. But even within the rules, there's lots of variation. As you can see, if you ever look at a lot of your competitors, which I'm sure you do, there's really very few commonalities between the designs that we see. And that's a good thing. One item that comes up sometimes is carrying over or using things that had been done previously, and we give you some feedback on those that is not acceptable anymore. And a lot of the time the feedback is, well, wait a minute, this was fine and accepted, so why is previously, so why is it not good anymore? Given a couple reasons for that. First is rules changes. Sometimes we do make some changes that will cause previous designs to no longer pass. We are running into a few of those this year, which we'll talk a little more about. Another one is sometimes we are looking more closely at areas than we had previously. Or we realize that something that we really needed to check, we weren't checking previously. But then the big one, and this is one from the last 2 years or so, we were giving you a lot of flexibility in 2021 because a lot of teams were carrying over what they had done for 2020. That's good, that's fine, and considering the situation, that's why we did that. However, there's less of that this year. And my comment on benchmarking other teams, we know you look at what everyone else is doing and you see what's going on. Well, you don't know what that team was told. That team may have really run into some problems trying to use that, or they may have been told in tech inspection that don't do this again. You don't know that. So if you see teams doing something that you think, oh, that might be okay, but go and look at the rules and just make sure that will be fine. And regarding the tech inspection and your documents, these are all pass-fail type criteria. And one of the things is your documents, your structural equivalency spreadsheet, your electric systems form, electronic throttle control forms, getting those approved prior to going on site at tech inspection helps everyone. Means you're more likely to pass tech inspection. Tech inspection goes much easier because really we're just checking to make sure that you have all your design matches what you put on your documents. You have all the required items at tech inspection, goes much smoother. If we have to try and approve your process and your designs, even though it hasn't been through that review yet, makes it much more difficult. And since we are now past the deadline for structural equivalency spreadsheet and electric systems forms, sometimes you'll get some feedback from your reviewers. Please work directly with your document reviewers. Post a message under your document submission if they have any feedback or you have any questions. Sometimes we'll get rules questions based on the feedback from the document reviews, but really you need to work with your document reviewer on that. And related to document submissions, we had just changed the rule that it is now 5 days late past the deadline. We would still allow you to submit. It used to be 10. And we still may remove your registration if you don't submit your documents. That is not changed, but we may do that more this year than we have previously. Now, one of the things is I'm still very surprised at how many teams submit their documents after the posted deadline. For example, structural equivalency spreadsheets this year was due on January the 10th. And we still had quite a few teams, I don't know the exact number, that did not submit before the deadline. In fact, some of them are even a couple of days after the deadline. So what I would advise you to do is please pay attention to the submission dates. There's still some coming up for your design documents, your cost documents. And those are published, those are available. Put them on your calendar, know exactly when those are. And please don't wait until the deadline to submit. There's no reward for submitting as close as you can to the actual deadline moment. In fact, with structural equivalency spreadsheets with 24 hours before the deadline, only about half of the teams had actually submitted. So just remember, with document submissions, that's easy. Just meet the deadline. It's very fair. It's completely under your control. A couple of things about the structural equivalency spreadsheet. We have some process improvements that we are gradually implementing over the last few years. You saw part of that a couple of years ago when we revised the actual structural equivalency spreadsheet documents. Now this year, and started to do this last year, but we continued this year, we actually began reviews as soon as teams had submitted their structural equivalency spreadsheets. In fact, the very first structural equivalency spreadsheet was approved in September. So congratulations. I want to give a call out here to Florida International University, who's been approved since September. There's no bonus points or anything other than this recognition, but I wanted to call them out and thank them for that. And as part of our process, we also have some tools that we can check very quickly to see if there's any common errors. So one of the things is, if you've gotten a rejection on your structural equivalency spreadsheet within the first 24, 48 hours after the submission, we've run that check on that to make sure that you're okay. If you don't have a rejection that right after you submitted, you should be okay. One of the things is we were looking for if teams are submitting blank documents, which is a good thing. Nobody does that. Apparently that was a problem a number of years ago, but not anymore. And one of the things is we actually have a tool where we can fix some problems in structural equivalency spreadsheets. Used to be we would kick it back to you and say, please download a fresh version and fill it out again. Well, we don't have to do as much of that as we used to. So that, again, that helps you, that helps us. If your reviewer has done that, they will actually send you back that and say, hey, here's a fixed copy. We'll be using this version to review. So you will have a copy of that fixed version. So with that, let's talk a little bit about a couple of the changes that have happened in the rules this year. There's a number of structural changes in the section F in particular. Now, rather than detailing those, there is an article posted at the designjudges.com website. It is unofficial, but it was written by one of our structural equivalency leads. It goes into much more detail and a lot of background information, more so than I can present here. What I'll tell you is go take a look at that if you have not seen it already. Firewalls. Firewalls have always been required to seal at all edges, but a lot of the times the floor was getting missed, where the firewall goes against the floor. And that's now stated in the rules. It's really not a change. It's there really to help you so you can be aware of that and not have to fix it when you come to technical inspection. The headrest padding material has changed. Instead of the relatively soft pink foam, it's the slightly firmer blue foam. And the specification for that is in the rules. There's also a SFI padding that remains acceptable. The vehicle number. There's a change to that for electric vehicles this year. And in the structural equivalency spreadsheets, there are actually 9 teams who did not correctly enter their vehicle number. And that won't cause them to fail the structural equivalency spreadsheet review, but they will have some problems in tech inspection. So if you are an electric vehicle team, just go reread that. You'll find that it's not much of a change, but be aware. And then due to some issues that came up, it's clarified that the figures and illustrations in the rules are not in themselves rules unless called out by the text. So for example, the cockpit templates, we give a drawing of their figure, and the rule says the template shown below. So that is being called out by the rules. And the technical inspection area, that's really the only thing that got majorly rewritten. I mean, we spent 3 years, rewriting the rules pretty comprehensively. And the last tech inspection section, just so it flowed and was a little bit cleaner how it was organized. Now, one of the things about technical inspection is your team should do a technical inspection yourself before you go to the event. So, and that helps to check and make sure you're in compliance. It also helps when you're in tech inspection that if the inspector says, well, can you show me some aspect, and you can be able to go right to it. Yes, here it is. And remember, as always, the team is responsible to meet the rules. We are not responsible for finding everything and saying it's good. You are responsible to meet the rules. Okay, talk a little bit about some of the events. This is the recent change in January that was announced a couple weeks ago. The presentation event will be conducted in 2 rounds. First round will be a virtual event prior to the on-site competitions, and all teams entered will do that. There is also a second round then, which will be finals for presentation, conducted at the event itself for some of the selected teams. So 2 stages. That was a decision that was made, so we're going to see how that works this year. The concept for the presentation event itself has not yet been released. So we sometimes get some questions about that. Please watch the FSAE online website and the news feed, there will be an announcement when we publish the presentation concept. For the design event, we are going for 2022, we are going to continue with the design review briefing document and a separate submission for 3-view drawings. Used to be we had a design report that contained that information. We tried the design review briefing for the 2021 knowledge event. We're going to continue with that for 2022. The design spec sheet still continues and remains unchanged. Now, one thing I do want to point out about the design event is that design judging and rules compliance are two different things. Your design judges really are not reviewing your tech documents, structural equivalency, electric systems form, so on, before judging. Where I'm getting with that is your design points are not based on how close you are to the rules limit. Please, if you think you're getting more design points or you think it's going to be better the closer you get to a rules limit, that is not the case. Now, your team has to make a lot of decisions on design, but that is not one of them. So the advice I would have for design is don't try to meet the minimum compliance, meaning 101% of the rule. Build it in with a margin, be above the rule. Because one of the things is you might not be completely right. But sometimes, even if you're not completely right, you may still have enough of a margin above that minimum compliance to where we can still go ahead and say, well, yeah, it's not really there, but you're fine and we can approve you on that. We run into a lot of problems where if you're very close to rules limits, it makes it much more complex for the reviewers to review, meaning you're not going to get your structural equivalency approved as soon, and we may have to do a lot of back and forth interaction with you as a team. Another thing to remember is when you manufacture it, you might not be able to manufacture as precisely as the design indicates. So that gets into more the build and how that is. I already covered about the document reviews. One common rules question that I'm going to talk about, I get this a couple of times a year, but one of the things is you can use the rules to solve questions. Here's how. We get a question about, is something an acceptable positive locking device? You'll recall that positive locking device is required on critical fasteners. And that question is almost always asked against T832. Well, that's the examples of specific positive locking devices, but it is not the only ones that are allowable. The rule is not the list in T832. The rule is the requirements in T831. Those two requirements are visible and does not rely on the clamping force involved. So something like a split ring lock washer is definitely not a positive locking device, because as soon as you lose that clamping force, it doesn't do much. So that's an example. But you can see how that is in the rules, and if you actually go and look at the requirements, meet the requirements, you can solve that question. So with that, I'd like to put in a plug here. So please, once you graduate, please volunteer and help us out. And volunteering has a number of areas. We especially can use some help with document reviews, these structural equivalency spreadsheets, electrical systems forms, etc. That is all done mostly prior to the event, but we've recently had a lot of the document reviewers who also help with tech inspection at the event and help the structural portion of tech inspection go much more smoothly. There's also tech inspection itself, and particularly technical inspection for electric vehicles. So as we have more teams that have alumni that have done electric vehicles, we're starting to get more of them helping out with some of the document reviews, some of the tech inspection. Would very much like that to continue. So please volunteer. I've been involved with this for many years, and it meant so much to me as a student. I keep coming back and helping out. So with that, thank you for your attention. Appreciate listening in on this. So right now, we are going to see about taking some questions or any discussion you have on rules or other areas. If you have any other input or things you might want to share with us, please let us know about that as well. So with that, I think, Matt, you may have some questions already.
Yes, and I'd like to start off with your last slide there. If someone would like to be a technical inspector, where could they start, Steve? Where could we point them to?
Normally what we will do is we will recruit volunteers through the FSAE online website. And also you may be able to send a message, jump ahead a slide or two here, to the collegiate competitions at sae.org website. They can point you in that direction. Or
Okay.
or any I think any of the SAE sections can probably put you in touch with the collegiate design series, and we can help you out with that.
Okay, thank you. Do you have any advice for getting new team members up to speed on the rules? I know the rule book could be quite large. Do you have any maybe tips or tricks, maybe printing out a handful of rule books or reviewing them once a month or anything like that?
Yeah, that's a good idea. The knowledge transfer in teams is an interesting subject because we have teams that are brand new. We have teams that are very experienced and have pretty well established programs over the years. If I was a new team, one of the things I would do is break up the rule book into specific chunks and, okay, you're going to be the structural. You take a look at those requirements. The powertrain would have separate requirements, but then you also really have to look at the events themselves and see what requirements are and try to come up with a concept. Now, sitting and reading rules is kind of, trying to start at the beginning and read it all the way through. Well, you probably get lost that way. So find an area that is of interest to you and dive into it and get some knowledge in that area, and then try to share that with some of your team members.
Yep. When I was on my team, we would have rules reviews at our meetings, usually during the weekends, and that was very helpful for new team members to get up to speed on. So is there, Steve, is there a certain area of the rule book that really troubles most teams? Is there anything you can elaborate on there?
Probably. They just going and going through all the rules questions, we probably get 80% of the rules questions are in the areas of structural or electric vehicle. And I know we've got a lot of teams that are very interested in electric vehicles, and some of the teams have never done electric vehicles before. So we do get a lot of questions there. And structural, there's a lot of complexity, a lot of rules to meet, and then there's we have the tube frame separate from the composite materials, so it can get pretty complex there. Now, one thing is some of the tools we have through structural equivalency, that's constantly being improved, and that's made both the design process for composite materials as well as the review a lot easier in the last few years.
Okay. At competition, who is the best person or persons to answer any really tough rules questions?
Well, at the competition, if an issue comes up or if you have something, there is an event captain for each of the events. Now, I'm not just talking the static and dynamic events. Technical inspection is the same way. We have some lead technical inspectors. And one of the things is if there is a question, our tech people will probably involve one of the lead tech inspectors. If it becomes a rules issue, they may also get myself or one of the other rules experts involved with that as well. So really, if you have a question, there's an event captain. That is really who you should be directing that question to.
Okay. And during the year, if teams have questions about rules, where should they go?
Are you talking specific rules questions or any general discussion?
Specific rules questions.
Yeah. If there's a specific rules question, the way to get that answer is by submitting a rules question through fsaeonline.com. The team would log into their account they have there, and there's a link that says submit a rules question. And from there, that would get routed to an appropriate expert who should be able to answer that.
Okay. And any other general questions about rules?
Well, other general. Sorry about that. Any other?
It's okay.
Yeah, other questions or items. One of the things I would suggest is if they have any specific comments or input, again, probably that email to collegiatecompetitions@sae.org, and we would route that, take a look at that.
Okay, thank you. The two events at Michigan in May and June, can you describe any differences between these events, Steve?
Yes. Yeah, you mentioned we're doing two events in 2022. Both are at the same location in Michigan. Now, the entries are a little bit different. The one in May is combustion only. The one in June is combustion and electric vehicles. Now, one of the things I would like to point out, though, is the rules are going to be the same, obviously, but the actual conduct of the event, the timing, things when the schedule may be different. For example, tech inspection for combustion versus tech inspection for electric. Electric vehicles have an additional layer of tech inspection. We may have some additional open hours on tech. We're not sure yet, we're discussing. But even when we get out and do the dynamic events, there may be some differences there. In particular, the schedule for, say, the first day of the dynamic events on Friday. Now, we're still discussing. I don't have any specific details on that. But if you're going to the Michigan event in June and you're looking at the schedule in May, it may not be the exact same one. So again, we'll publish some information prior to the event. Please make sure you look at that and make sure that you're aware of those differences.
Okay, thank you. There was a comment about these rules event overviews. We normally would have them in person. We hope to this fall doing this again in person, depending on how the climate is. So we would like to do this in person, and we're planning on it depending on how circumstances are. So thank you for that. If you have any other questions, please add them to the chat window so I can explain them to Steve. I'm going to just give it another 10 more seconds here, Steve. Do we have any good questions rolling?
Okay. Yeah, again, we encourage you to ask any questions. This is open to you. Yeah. One of the things I will bring up is for, if you have any ideas on where you might want or the Formula SAE competition to go in the future, or now also if you see some things you don't want us to do, please let us know. You can bring them up here, or you can send them to the SAE email. Either way. But again, if you'd like to, anything you might like to see or might not like to see, please chime in and let us know.
Okay. Well, thank you, Steve. There are okay. We don't have any more questions. If you can move on to the next slide, Steve. I just have a couple event updates that I would like to review. If you could move to there we go. All right, so there are some upcoming events for the SAE Detroit section. On Friday, January 28th, there's a vehicle performance development and tuning event with William and Thomas from General Motors. And then on February 11th, I think 3 weeks from now, there's a cost event overview with Richard LePage. And then Friday, February 18th, the rescheduled FSAE presentation event overview with Adam Zemke. If you'd like to go to those events, please make sure to visit www.sae-detroit.org and register for your personalized Zoom link. And if you can go to the next slide, Steve, for me. Thank you. In a month from now is going to be the 2022 Engineers Week, and SAE International is hosting daily activities, as you can see described below, for our members and volunteers. Please make sure to go to the link below to register, and if you volunteer, you have a chance to win a set of Apple AirPod Pros. So I highly encourage you to do that. And if you can move to the last slide, Steve. I just want to thank our participants for joining our rules event overview, and a special thank you to Steve, today's presenter, the SAE Detroit section staff, Alba Cologne, for your involvement in putting together this presentation. Please remember to join us for the Formula SAE cost event overview on February 11th. For any questions or inquiries, please email the SAE Detroit section at events@sae-detroit.org, shown on the screen. And if you're watching this on YouTube, please consider liking this video, sharing it with someone who might find it useful, and subscribing to our SAE Detroit section YouTube channel. Thank you and have a great day.